The first thing I heard when I woke up was a machine beeping beside me, and my husband crying quietly in the hallway. I tried to move, but pain shot through my chest like glass cutting my lungs. "Where's my baby?" I whispered, barely able to breathe. Daniel froze. Then he looked at the floor. "She's fighting, but she's strong, Paige," he said, his voice shaking. That was the moment I realized something was wrong, not just with my body, but with my family. I had just survived a car accident at 7 months pregnant. My daughter had been born too early and rushed into the NICU. I expected my parents to be there, praying, waiting, anything. Instead, my mother was posting pictures from a casino night. For 9 years, I secretly sent my parents $4,500 every single month. I paid their bills, their debts, their vacations, everything. And not once did they say thank you. But what my grandfather said to them after my accident didn't just break my family. It changed everything. And that's where my story truly began. Before I share this chapter of my life, if you've ever felt ignored, unheard, or underestimated, then this channel is for you. Subscribe to Jossy Revenge, where every story has a heartbeat. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. I still remember the exact moment it all started, even though I tried to convince myself it was just temporary, just something good daughters do. I had just gotten my first major promotion at the firm. The kind of promotion that made my coworkers clap during the Monday meeting and made Daniel take me out for dinner that night. I felt proud. Independent. Like my life was finally moving forward. Then my mother called. Her voice sounded shaky, fragile, like she had rehearsed it. "Paige, honey, your father lost another contract. We're drowning here. I don't know how we're going to keep the house." I froze in my apartment kitchen, staring at the pasta boiling over on the stove. "How much do you need?" I asked without thinking. There was a pause. Then she sniffed. "Just until we get back on our feet." That, just, turned into $4,500 the next week. I told myself it was family. Temporary help. Something any loving daughter would do. I even set up an automatic monthly transfer so they wouldn't have to keep asking. I thought I was protecting their dignity. What I didn't realize was that I had quietly signed a contract with guilt. At first, it felt good. My mother's voice became lighter during calls. My father stopped sounding stressed. They started talking about fixing the house, taking short trips, even upgrading their car. I smiled every time they sounded happy. But something strange began happening. They never said thank you. Not once. The first year passed, and I convinced myself they were just embarrassed to mention money. By the third year, I noticed something else. My younger sister Megan was posting beach vacations, designer handbags, and weekend brunch photos that screamed luxury. I casually asked my mom about it one afternoon while Daniel and I were grocery shopping. "Oh, Megan deserves to enjoy her youth," my mother said casually. "She's still finding herself." Daniel slowly lowered the cereal box he was holding and stared at me. After the call ended, he leaned closer and whispered, "Are they using your money to fund her lifestyle?" I laughed it off, but my chest felt tight. "Megan just needs time," I said, forcing confidence into my voice. Daniel didn't argue. That was one thing about him. He never pushed, but his silence always asked louder questions than words. By year 5, Daniel and I had started house hunting. We visited open homes every weekend, walking through empty living rooms while imagining baby pictures on the walls and Sunday breakfasts in sunlit kitchens. Then one night, as we sat with a mortgage advisor, my phone buzzed. It was a fraud alert from my bank. My account balance had dropped lower than expected because my parents had asked me to increase the monthly transfer to cover unexpected medical bills. I hadn't told Daniel yet. The advisor smiled politely and said, "You're about $4,000 short of the recommended savings buffer." Daniel looked at me slowly. "Paige, is there something you're not telling me?" I stared at my hands, twisting my engagement ring around my finger. "I help my parents sometimes," I whispered. Sometimes, or every month? His question landed like a stone in my stomach. Every month, I admitted. How much? The room felt too quiet. 4,500. Daniel leaned back in his chair and ran his hands over his face. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse me. That somehow hurt worse. That's over 50,000 a year, Paige, he said softly. I know, but they need me. And what about us? He asked gently. That question haunted me for months. I tried cutting back once. Just once. I reduced the transfer by $1,000 and called my mom to explain. I thought she would understand. Instead, she cried. After everything we've done raising you, you're abandoning us? The guilt crushed me. I restored the full amount the same day. Daniel watched me do it from across the living room. He didn't speak, but I saw disappointment settle into his shoulders like permanent weight. By year 7, we were still renting a small apartment. Daniel picked up extra freelance work. I started skipping vacations and postponing buying things I loved. I convinced myself sacrifice was proof of love. Then came the dinner that should have opened my eyes. We visited my parents for Christmas. Megan arrived 2 hours late, stepping out of a brand new luxury SUV with a red bow on the hood. My mother ran outside screaming with excitement like she had just won the lottery. Oh my God, Megan. It's perfect. I stared at the car, my stomach twisting. Who bought it? I asked quietly. Megan shrugged, flipping her perfectly styled hair. Mom and Dad helped with the down payment. Daniel slowly turned his head toward me. I could feel his stare burning into my side profile. During dinner, my mother raised a glass. To Megan, for chasing her dreams. Everyone cheered. No one mentioned me, the daughter funding those dreams. I smiled anyway. I had mastered that smile, the one that hides cracks. Later that night, Daniel and I sat in the guest bedroom. He closed the door gently and sat beside me. Paige, have you ever asked yourself why they treat Megan differently? I shrugged, staring at the patterned wallpaper. She's the baby of the family. No, he said softly. You're the safety net. There's a difference. His words lingered long after we drove home. By year 9, the transfers had become invisible. Like rent. Like taxes. Something automatic, unquestioned. I barely noticed how much of my life revolved around maintaining their comfort. Then I found out I was pregnant. Daniel cried when he saw the test. Happy tears. He spun me around our tiny kitchen, laughing like a kid. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to dream about a future that belonged to me. I thought my parents would finally be proud. That maybe, just maybe, this would change everything. When I told my mother, she sounded distracted. That's nice, sweetheart. Just make sure you don't let it affect your career. I stared at my phone, stunned. Daniel watched my face fall and wrapped his arms around me without asking questions. He had learned that silence often meant heartbreak. As my pregnancy progressed, Daniel became more protective. He started reviewing our finances more closely. He even suggested couples counseling, not because we were failing, but because he wanted us stronger. One night, as we sat reviewing expenses, he pointed at the transfer again. Paige, we're about to have a baby. We need stability. I know, I whispered. Do they even know how much you've sacrificed? I shook my head slowly. No. And I don't think they'd care. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Daniel reached across the table and held my hand. Then maybe it's time you cared about yourself. I wish I had listened sooner. Because 3 months later, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, my entire world shattered on a highway. Rain hammered against the windshield so hard that afternoon it felt like the sky was warning me to turn back. My hands were tight around the steering wheel, my mind juggling a dozen thoughts, doctor appointments, baby names, and the email my mother had sent that morning asking if I could temporarily increase the transfer again. I was 7 months pregnant, exhausted, and honestly, numb. Emma kicked gently inside me, like she always did when I drove. I smiled and rubbed my belly. "We're almost home, sweetheart," I whispered. Then headlights flashed too close. A horn screamed. And everything exploded into metal, glass, and silence. When I woke up, I was drowning in oxygen tubes and hospital lights. My chest burned with every breath. I tried to move, but pain pinned me down like concrete. Daniel's voice cracked somewhere near my bed. "Paige, stay with me, okay? Just stay with me." "My baby," I croaked. His eyes filled instantly. "She's alive, but she came early. She's in the NICU. She's fighting." The words hit me like a second crash. I later learned I had suffered a collapsed lung. Emergency surgery saved my life, and forced doctors to deliver Emma prematurely. She weighed barely 3 pounds. Tubes and machines were helping her breathe. But the part that shattered me wasn't the accident. It was who wasn't there. Daniel tried calling my parents while I was in surgery. Over and over again. They didn't answer. Finally, my mother texted back hours later. "Busy tonight. Casino fundraiser. We'll call tomorrow." Tomorrow. My daughter was fighting for her life, and tomorrow was good enough. Daniel told me later that he stood in the hospital hallway reading that message, feeling something inside him snap. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He simply scrolled through my contacts and called someone I hadn't spoken to properly in months. My grandfather, Harold. Grandpa Harold had always been quiet, observant, and sharp in ways that made people underestimate him. He lived 2 states away but still sent me birthday letters handwritten in neat cursive. When Daniel explained everything, Grandpa didn't hesitate. He drove overnight. I remember the first time I saw him standing beside my hospital bed. His silver hair was messy, his coat wrinkled, and his eyes filled with something I had never seen before, fury. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked softly. I tried to smile through the oxygen mask. "I didn't want to worry you." He squeezed my hand gently but didn't reply. Instead, he asked Daniel one question. "Is there anything else she's been hiding?" Daniel hesitated. I saw the internal battle on his face. Loyalty versus honesty. Then he sighed and told him everything. The transfers. The 9 years. The $500,000. Grandpa didn't shout. He didn't even look shocked. He just nodded slowly like he had confirmed a suspicion he carried for years. The next morning, he disappeared. I thought he had gone home. I didn't know he was about to detonate a truth bomb inside our family. He drove straight to my parents' house. Later, my father told me how it unfolded. Grandpa walked into their living room uninvited while my mother and Megan were drinking coffee and scrolling through shopping sites. "Where were you last night?" Grandpa asked calmly. My mother laughed nervously. "At a charity casino event." "Why?" "Your daughter nearly died. Your granddaughter is in intensive care." The room reportedly went silent. My mother apparently tried to defend herself. "Oh, Paige exaggerates medical stuff sometimes. She's always been dramatic." That was when Grandpa placed printed bank statements on the coffee table. 9 years of transfers. Every month. Every amount. My father stared at the papers like he was looking at a ghost. "You knew about this?" he asked my mother quietly. She stuttered. She offered to help. Grandpa's voice cut through the room like ice. "She didn't offer. You conditioned her." Megan tried to interrupt, claiming she had nothing to do with it, but Grandpa turned to her sharply. "You enjoyed vacations funded by your sister's postponed life," he said coldly. My father sank into his chair, rubbing his face in disbelief. He had known I helped occasionally, but he had never seen the full numbers. Then Grandpa delivered the sentence that changed everything. I have updated my will. My mother straightened instantly. My estate will go primarily to Paige. Held in trust for Emma. A portion will go to my son, he said, nodding toward my father. And a conditional 5% will go to you and Megan, if you complete family accountability counseling and demonstrate genuine reconciliation. My mother exploded. You're punishing me for accepting help from my own child? No, Grandpa replied calmly. I'm correcting years of emotional exploitation. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, I was finally allowed to see Emma for the first time. Nurses wheeled me into the NICU, my body aching with every bump of the chair. She was so tiny. Covered in wires and monitors. Her chest rose and fell in fragile rhythm. I slipped my finger into her palm, and she squeezed it weakly. That tiny grip shattered something inside me, and rebuilt something stronger at the same time. What would you do if someone hurt your child the way I let them hurt me? I whispered to myself. Daniel knelt beside me, resting his head against my shoulder. You survived, he said softly. And she's going to survive too. But Paige, this has to end. I nodded slowly. For the first time in 9 years, the guilt didn't scream louder than my instincts. That night, while Emma slept inside her incubator, I opened my banking app with trembling hands. I stared at the automatic transfer scheduled for midnight. My finger hovered over the cancel button for almost a full minute. My mother's voice echoed in my head. After everything we've done for you. Then I looked at Emma through the glass. I pressed cancel. The silence that followed felt terrifying, and freeing all at once. I didn't call my parents. I didn't send explanations. I simply allowed the silence to speak for me. But I had no idea that my mother wasn't planning to stay silent for long. Because she wasn't done using me yet. The first message from my mother arrived 3 days after I canceled the transfer. It wasn't concern. It wasn't, how is Emma? It wasn't even, are you okay? It was one sentence. Paige, the payment didn't come through. I stared at my phone while sitting beside Emma's incubator. The monitor beside her beeped steadily, reminding me how fragile life could be, and how quickly priorities become clear when survival is on the line. I didn't respond. 10 minutes later, another message came. Your father's insurance is due tomorrow. Please fix this. Daniel looked over my shoulder and gently placed his hand over mine. You don't owe them an explanation, he whispered. But years of conditioning don't disappear overnight. My fingers trembled as guilt crept into my chest like an old ghost refusing to leave. Then Emma made a soft squeaking noise in her sleep, and something inside me hardened in a way I had never felt before. I locked my phone and placed it face down. 2 days later, my mother called. I answered, mostly because I knew she wouldn't stop. Paige, what is wrong with you? She snapped before I could speak. You know we rely on that money. I swallowed slowly. I almost died, Mom. Well, you didn't, she replied flatly. And now your financial decisions are affecting the entire family. The words felt unreal. Like I was listening to a stranger. My daughter is in intensive care, I said quietly. There was a pause. Then she sighed dramatically. You always make everything about yourself. Something inside me cracked open completely. I've given you nearly $500,000, I said, my voice shaking but steady. Did you even notice? Silence filled the line. Then she said something that finally destroyed whatever hope I had left. That's what successful children do for their parents. I hung up. Daniel pulled me into his arms as tears spilled down my face, but they didn't feel like the helpless tears I used to cry. They felt like grief and release. Weeks passed. Emma grew stronger. She gained weight, opened her eyes more, and eventually wrapped her tiny fingers around Daniel's beard during skin-to-skin bonding, making him laugh like a child. Grandpa visited almost daily, reading old poetry books beside Emma's incubator like she could already understand him. Meanwhile, my mother's messages became more aggressive, then oddly sweet, then passive-aggressive, cycling through every emotional tactic she knew. I ignored them all. Then came Emma's 1-month celebration. It wasn't anything huge. Just a small gathering at Grandpa's house after Emma was finally discharged from the hospital. Close family. Warm food. Soft music. Peaceful, or at least it started that way. My father arrived first, holding flowers and looking older than I remembered. He hugged me tightly, whispering, "I'm sorry. I should have seen this sooner." For the first time, I believed him. Then my mother and Megan arrived. My mother walked in smiling too widely, carrying an expensive designer baby bag like it was a peace offering. Megan followed, scrolling through her phone, barely acknowledging anyone. The evening stayed calm until Grandpa tapped his glass gently. "I'd like to make a small announcement," he said warmly, standing beside Emma's bassinet. Everyone quieted. That was when my mother leaned toward Megan, unaware that her microphone from the baby slideshow presentation was still live, connected to the house speakers. "I just need Paige to calm down so she doesn't mess up our inheritance situation," my mother whispered. The words echoed through the entire living room. The air froze. My father's face went pale. Megan dropped her drink. Daniel slowly turned his head toward me, his jaw tightening. My mother realized too late. Her eyes widened as she looked around the silent room. "That's not what I meant," she stammered. I stood slowly, Emma sleeping peacefully in my arms. For the first time in my life, my voice didn't shake when I spoke. "You never came to the hospital because you were worried about money," I said quietly. "No. You didn't thank me for 9 years because you believed you deserved it. Paige, listen. You don't love me," I continued, tears streaming freely but my voice calm. "You love what I provide." The room stayed silent except for Emma's soft breathing. "I won't let my daughter grow up thinking love has a price tag," I said. Then I walked toward the door and opened it. "You need to leave," I said gently. My mother looked around for support, but no one moved. Even Megan looked down, ashamed. My father stepped forward slowly. "Go home," he told her quietly. That moment broke something inside our family forever, but it also rebuilt something honest. My mother left without another word. In the months that followed, life didn't magically become perfect. Healing rarely works like that. But it became real. My father started visiting weekly, bringing groceries, fixing things around our apartment, and slowly rebuilding trust through actions instead of apologies. Grandpa finalized his estate arrangements and spent more time teaching Daniel about family investments and teaching me something even more valuable: how to receive love without earning it. Megan eventually called me months later. She cried for an hour straight, admitting she had started therapy and never realized how deeply she benefited from the imbalance. Our relationship didn't instantly heal, but it started growing roots for the first time. As for me, I learned how quiet peace feels after years of emotional noise. I used the money I saved to finally buy a home with Daniel. Nothing flashy. Just warm, safe, and filled with laughter that didn't require sacrifice to exist. Sometimes, when Emma falls asleep on my chest, I think about the cycle that almost continued through her life. And I thank God it ended with me. Moral of the story: I learned that love should never feel like a transaction, and family should never require you to disappear just to belong. Boundaries are not betrayal, they are protection for your peace and your future. Walking away from toxic patterns doesn't break families, it gives them a chance to rebuild honestly. Today, I raise my daughter knowing she will be loved for who she is, not for what she gives. If my story touched you, hit that subscribe button for more emotional tales from Jossy Revenge. And even if it didn't, come on, subscribe anyway, I'll win you over next time. Drop a comment, like the video, and let's keep the stories alive. Thanks for watching.